In October 1972, a small aircraft carrying a rugby team from Montevideo took off on a flight to Santiago. On board were 45 passengers, most of them young rugby players and their friends, excited for a match across the mountains. The plane climbed into the towering peaks of the Andes Mountains, where the weather can change suddenly and violently. As the aircraft flew through thick clouds, the pilots struggled to see the mountains around them. Strong winds pushed the plane off course. Suddenly, the aircraft struck a ridge. One wing tore away. Moments later, the other wing broke off as well. The plane slammed into a remote valley of snow and ice. When the wreckage finally stopped sliding down the mountain, survivors looked around in shock. Some passengers had died instantly in the crash, but many were still alive. They were injured, freezing, and surrounded by endless white mountains. They quickly realized something terrifying. They were completely alone in one of the most remote places on Earth. 27 people had survived the crash of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crash, but the situation was desperate. The temperature at night dropped far below freezing. There were no trees, no animals, and no food. The survivors used pieces of the broken plane to create a shelter from the wind. They melted snow for water and rationed the small amount of food they had found in the luggage. But within days, the food ran out. They waited and hoped that rescue teams would find them. Occasionally, they saw planes flying in the distance, but the white wreckage blended into the snow, making them almost invisible from the air. Then, another disaster struck. One night, as the survivors slept inside the broken fuselage, a massive avalanche thundered down the mountain. Snow crashed into the wreckage, burying several people alive and trapping others under the snow for hours. More survivors died. Weeks passed. The group grew weaker. Finally, someone managed to fix a small radio from the wreckage. When they turned it on, they heard a broadcast that shattered their last hope. Search teams had stopped looking. The authorities believed everyone on the plane was dead. At that moment, the survivors realized the truth. No rescue was coming. If they wanted to live, they would have to survive on their own in the frozen mountains. With no animals or plants anywhere in the valley, the group eventually made the most painful decision of their lives. To stay alive, they began eating the bodies of the passengers who had died in the crash. It was the only food available in the endless snow. After nearly 2 months in the mountains, 2 survivors decided to attempt the impossible. Their names were Nando Parrado and Roberto Canessa. They packed what little supplies they had and began walking into the mountains. The journey was brutal. Every day they climbed higher through deep snow and thin air. The peaks around them seemed endless. Several times they believed they had reached the edge of the mountains, only to see more towering ridges ahead. For 10 days they continued walking across glaciers and frozen valleys. Finally, one afternoon, they saw something unbelievable. Far in the distance, a man riding a horse on the other side of a river. They shouted and waved desperately, but the rushing water was too loud for the man to hear them. The next day he returned and threw them a piece of paper tied to a rock. Parrado wrote a message explaining that they were survivors of a plane crash in the mountains. The man rode to the nearest town to alert authorities. Soon, helicopters arrived in the Andes. After 72 days trapped in the mountains, the remaining survivors were finally rescued. Out of the original 45 passengers, only 16 were still alive. Their story became one of the most extraordinary survival stories in history, a testament to the strength of the human will to survive even in the most impossible conditions.